He left the safe open on purpose, but not out of carelessness. It was a trap. For years, William Lancaster had trusted no one. Once a towering figure in global shipping, he had become a ghost in his own mansion, betrayed by the very people who once called him family. His son tried to declare him insane. His daughter drained his accounts. His best friend, a doctor, faked medical bills for years. And when his wife, Margaret, passed away, the last ember of warmth in his life vanished. Now, at 40, William spoke to no one, living in silent paranoia behind iron gates and cameras. That is, until Elena Brooks showed up. She wasn't flashy. She didn't flatter. She asked only one question when she arrived. Would you like the library shelves dusted only, or arranged by height? William froze. It was the first time someone had shown him respect, not curiosity. Still, he needed proof. He left the safe door ajar. Inside, stacks of cash, gold, and a slip of paper with the code. A test. Elena found it. And in the moment, when she could have changed her life, when her mother's voice shook over the phone, begging for $38,000 to save the family store, she did the unthinkable. She locked the safe. William watched in disbelief, and for the first time in years he felt something stir in his chest. Trust. He thought trust was dead, until the housekeeper locked the safe herself. William Lancaster wasn't always like this. There was a time when his name echoed through boardrooms and business headlines. As the founder of a global shipping empire, he built fleets, negotiated billion-dollar deals, and shaped trade routes. But all that power meant nothing when betrayal came from those closest to him. His son tried to have him declared mentally incompetent, not out of concern, but to steal control of the family trust. His daughter, once his little girl who used to hold his hand during storms, cleaned out entire accounts while smiling sweetly. His best friend, a physician he trusted like a brother, forged medical bills and drained him for years. And then came the final blow. Cancer stole Margaret, his wife, his light, the only one who never lied. With her death, the mansion outside Savannah became a mausoleum, echoing with silence, distrust, and the cold breath of security alarms. William didn't repaint. He didn't move her things. The library, her favorite room, stayed spotless and untouched. By age 40, William's only companion was silence. He trusted no one. Meals were delivered. Employees lasted days, sometimes hours, before he dismissed them for minor offenses. The world believed he was paranoid, dangerous. Maybe he was. But that changed the day he realized he could no longer handle everything alone. His body, once strong, had grown frail. He needed help. Someone to maintain the estate. Reluctantly, he contacted a staffing agency in Atlanta, demanding a housekeeper with no criminal record, no social media, no curiosity, and no interest in small talk. They sent him 3 profiles. He shredded the first 2. The third, though, gave him pause. Her name, Elena Brooks, 27 years old, quiet, disciplined, purpose-driven. He scoffed. Purpose was a word people used when they couldn't explain why they needed money. But something about her file made him hesitate. He watched from his surveillance room as she stepped off a faded city bus and approached the estate gate. No makeup, no jewelry, no forced smile, just composure and calm. She waited quietly as he opened the door. When she entered, she didn't compliment the decor or ask about days off. She only said, "For the library, should I dust the shelves only? Or would you prefer the books arranged by height?" William froze. No one had ever asked about the library, not with that kind of care. He answered flatly, "Just dust. Everything stays as it is." She nodded and took notes without probing into his past, his wealth, or his silence. But William didn't trust easily, so he set a trap. The next morning, Before she arrived for her first shift, he opened the door to a private room, a vault room no one else had ever seen. He left the massive safe door slightly ajar. Inside were gold coins, stacks of cash, old deeds, and one folded slip of paper. The safe's access code laid out like an invitation, temptation in its rawest form. Then he retreated to his surveillance room and watched. At exactly 8 a.m., Elena arrived and began her duties. She dusted, mopped, and polished. With quiet precision, for over an hour, she showed no signs of deviation. But then she walked toward the east wing. William leaned in. She paused at the open safe. She saw it, and she froze. Her hand trembled. William clenched his jaw, but she didn't move forward. Instead, she slowly backed away, pulled out her phone, and called William's secretary. "The safe is open," she said. "Should I wait or lock it?" Her voice was calm, professional. William was stunned. Then her phone rang again, this time her mother. William zoomed in on her face. Her expression shifted. He read her lips. The family store, their only income, was about to be shut down unless they could pay $38,000 by the end of the week. Elena's eyes welled up. She promised to find a way. She looked back at the safe. The paper with the code was right there, her family's survival within reach. She stepped closer. William held his breath. But instead of taking the money, Elena entered a random code, not the real one, forcing the tiled Adamana. The door to lock shut. Then she took the paper, folded it, tucked it into her pocket, and collapsed into a nearby chair, crying quietly. Not from regret, but from exhaustion. From doing the right thing when it hurt the most. For 2 more hours she stayed there, not stealing, not leaving, just guarding the locked safe. William watched it all. He had seen people lie, cheat, and steal. He had never seen someone lock temptation away with such pain and honor. When the clock struck 6, William descended the stairs, his steps lighter. Elena stood when she heard him. Her eyes were still tired, but proud. When he said, "You're still here," she replied, "I noticed the safe. I called your secretary. I stayed." He nodded. "I know. I watched everything." She looked hurt. "You watched?" "I had to," he said. "I don't trust easily." "I understand." "It's your home," she replied. He handed her a sealed envelope, a $50,000 check. "This is yours. You earned it." She shook her head. "I can't accept this. Doing the right thing isn't something to be rewarded. It's just right." William was speechless. And then Elena shared a secret. Years ago, her cousin needed life-saving surgery. An anonymous donor paid for it. When she applied for the job and saw his name on the hospital donor list, she knew it was him. "I came to serve, not to take," she said. William's heart stopped. He remembered that donation. He stood silent for a long moment. Then, he handed her a leather folder. "This is the Winters Trust Foundation. I've never found anyone I trusted to run it until now." Elena trembled. "I'm just a housekeeper," she whispered. "No," William replied. "You're the only person who reminded me what it means to be human." And in that moment, both of them learned something simple but profound. Family is not made by blood. It's made by trust. She could have taken the money and walked away. But what she did next shocked a man who had stopped believing in people. William Lancaster had spent years watching people disappoint him. He wasn't always the recluse the town whispered about. Once, he was a name that made headlines. The founder, a global shipping empire, known for his intellect, power, and unwavering discipline. But power, as he would later learn, attracts betrayal. His son, once his proudest legacy, tried to have him declared mentally unfit to seize control of the family trust. His daughter, who used to wrap her arms around his legs during thunderstorms, emptied his bank accounts behind his back. And his best friend, a physician he once called brother, forged years' worth of fake treatment bills. The worst part wasn't the money. It was the erosion of trust, the realization that the people he had loved most had watched him, waited, and taken what they wanted when he was most vulnerable. And then there was Margaret, his wife, his warmth, his only tether to hope. Cancer took her slowly, cruelly, and with her death, the mansion they'd once filled with laughter turned into a cold fortress of silence. He preserved her favorite room, the library, exactly as it was, never moving a book, never dusting a frame himself. Everything else he kept under tight control. 26 rooms, 16 hidden cameras, and 3 panic alarms. He trusted no one. Hired help came and went. Most left in tears, some in confusion. William didn't care, until his health began to falter, until he had no choice but to ask for help. That's when Elena Brooks entered his life. She arrived without fanfare, a quiet woman in her late 20s, wearing plain shoes, no makeup, and an expression that didn't seek approval. She didn't compliment his mansion, didn't ask about benefits. The first thing she said was, "Should I dust the shelves only, or arrange the books by height?" It was about the library. Margaret's library. William paused. "Just dust," he said. "Everything stays the same." There was something in Elena's tone, precise, focused, respectful, that made him pause. But he had been fooled before. So, he created a test. The next day, he left the door to his private vault ajar. Inside, cash, gold coins, documents, worth millions, and a small paper, the code to the safe, left on the table like a forgotten receipt. And then he watched. At 8 a.m., Elena arrived and went straight to work. For an hour, she dusted shelves and organized cushions. Then she headed down the east wing and stopped. She saw the safe. William leaned forward in his surveillance chair, breath held. Her hand trembled. She stepped closer, but instead of grabbing the cash, Elena backed into the hallway, pulled out her phone, and called his secretary. "There's a safe open in the east wing," she said calmly. "Should I wait for instructions or lock it?" William was stunned, but still cautious. Then the phone rang again. Her mother. William watched as Elena's expression shifted in real time. He read her lips as tears welled in her eyes. The family grocery store, their only livelihood, was in danger of closing. They owed $38,000 by the end of the week. The safe sat wide open. A single stack of bills could save everything. No one would know. William was a billionaire. She was just a housekeeper. The math made sense. But Elena didn't move. Instead, she stepped forward and entered a fake code. The safe beeped, then locked. She folded the slip of paper with the real code and slipped it into her pocket. Then, exhausted, she sat in a nearby chair and cried. She didn't cry from guilt. She cried because she had fought a war within herself and chosen to do what was right. For 2 more hours, she sat there like a silent sentinel, watching the safe like it was hers to protect. William watched every second, and something broke inside him, something hardened over years of betrayal. And out of the cracks, trust began to grow again. At 6 o'clock, he finally descended the stairs. His footsteps echoed through the hall as he approached Elena. "You're still here," he said gently. She stood quickly, wiping her tears. "Yes, I called your secretary and stayed to make sure. Nothing happened." "I know," he replied. "I watched everything." She blinked, surprised. Then, without anger, she said, "You have the right to protect your home." William handed her a sealed envelope. "This is yours. $50,000. You earned it." But Elena shook her head. "I can't accept this." Integrity shouldn't come with a reward. I did what was right, that's all. William was silent. Then Elena said something that stopped him cold. Years ago, my cousin needed surgery. We couldn't afford it. But an anonymous donor paid for everything. When I saw your name on the hospital's donor list, I knew it was you. That's why I came. To serve, not to steal. William's heart ached. He remembered that donation. He never expected to meet someone touched by it, let alone someone who would restore his faith. He walked to his desk, pulled out a leather folder, and handed it to her. This is the Winters Trust Foundation, he said. I couldn't find anyone to lead it. Until now. Elena froze. But I'm just a housekeeper. No, William said. You're the only person who reminded me what it means to be human. And in that moment, both of them realized something powerful. You don't need blood to build family. You only need trust. He thought it was just another hire. What he found was the one person who would change everything. For years, William Lancaster built walls, not just around his mansion, but around his heart. He had once been one of America's most respected entrepreneurs, a billionaire shipping magnate with global influence. But betrayal doesn't care how powerful you are. First came the family betrayals. His son tried to declare him mentally incompetent to seize the inheritance. His daughter drained his bank account and disappeared. His personal doctor, a man he once trusted like a brother, forged years of medical treatments and siphoned away millions. And then, death. Margaret, his wife, died of cancer. The only person who had never lied to him never tried to take anything. The woman who filled the house with cinnamon bread, sunflowers, now gone, leaving only shadows. William didn't repaint, didn't redecorate. He preserved her favorite room, the library, untouched and sacred. But everything else, from the locked drawers to the surveillance, cameras became a fortress of control. He had 16 hidden cameras, 3 panic alarms, and more motion sensors than most banks. And he lived completely alone. Until one day, his body began to fail him. Shaky hands, shortness of breath. Age was creeping. And paranoia could no longer sweep the floors or clean the windows. Reluctantly, he called a staffing agency. He gave them a list of demands longer than a Russum. No criminal record, no social media, no personnel questions, no curiosity. They sent 3 profiles. The first 2 were discarded within seconds. The third name stopped. Him. Elena Brooks. Something about her file, plain, precise, purpose-driven, caught his attention. And then, he saw her. Through his surveillance cameras, he watched as she stepped off a bus. She wore no makeup, no expensive shoes, no phony smile. She walked with calm and stood at the gate with her, hands clasped. When he opened the door, she didn't talk too much or try to impress him. She simply nodded. And then she asked the question that froze him. For the library, would you prefer I dust only? Or organize the books by height? He hadn't told her about the library. It was Margaret's sanctuary. And yet, this stranger had respected its presence, not invaded it. That moment told him more than a background check ever could. But still, trust doesn't come easy when you've been betrayed by your own blood. So he tested her. The next morning, he left the door to his private vault room cracked open. Inside was temptation in its rawest form. Gold coins, stacks of $100 bills, documents worth millions, and a folded slip of paper. The safe's code, sitting on the table like bait. And then he waited in his surveillance room. At 8 a.m., Elena entered the house and began cleaning. She moved gracefully, focused. Over an hour passed, and then she made her way to the east wing, to the door, to the open vault. William held his breath. She stepped into view, paused. Her hand trembled. Her eyes landed on the money, and then she turned around, pulled out her phone, and called his secretary. There's a safe open in the east wing, she said. Should I close it or wait for instructions? William leaned back in his chair, stunned. But the test wasn't over. Moments later, her phone rang again. This time, it was her mother. William zoomed in. He read Elena's lips. The family grocery store was about to be shut down. They needed $38,000 to survive the week. The pain on Elena's face was unmistakable. Her lips trembled. Her eyes filled with tears. The money was right there. She stepped forward, then stopped. Instead of grabbing a bundle, she picked up the slip of paper, the code, and punched in a random number. The safe beeped and locked. She folded the real code, tucked it in her pocket, and sat in a nearby chair. And she cried, not because she regretted her decision, but because it had taken everything in her to make it. For 2 hours, she didn't move, didn't touch anything, just sat there, guarding the safe, protecting what wasn't hers. William watched every second, and something broke open inside him. When he finally walked down the hallway that evening, his steps were lighter. Elena stood the quoting. Moment she heard him, tried to hide the evidence of tears. Failed. You're still here, he said softly. I called your secretary, she said, and I stayed to make sure no one else came near the planks. Safe. He nodded. I know. I watched the cameras. She didn't flinch. She simply replied, It's your right. It's your home. Then he handed her an envelope, a $50,000 check. You earned this. But she pushed it back. I can't accept this, she said quietly. Doing the right thing isn't something I do for money. William's heart clenched. He had spent years believing everyone had a price. But here was a woman who refused the reward for her integrity. And then, she told him something he never expected. Years ago, my cousin needed a surgery. We didn't have the money, but an anonymous donor covered it. When I saw your name on the donor list during the job application, I knew it was you. That's why I wanted to work here, to serve the man who helped my family. William couldn't speak. He remembered that donation. He never thought he'd meet someone it had saved, let alone someone who would restore his belief in humanity. He walked to his desk, opened a drawer, pulled out a leather folder. This is the Winters Trust Foundation. I created it to help people, but I've never trusted anyone to run it. Until now. Elena's hands shook. But I'm just a housekeeper. No, he said. You're the reason I finally remembered what it means to trust again. And in that moment, everything changed. Not because of money, but because a woman with nothing to gain made the choice to protect a man who had already lost everything. Family isn't always about blood. Sometimes, it's about honor. He left the safe wide open. And what she did next restored his belief in something he thought was long dead. Honor. William Lancaster didn't trust people. Not anymore. And he had good reason. Once a billionaire shipping tycoon, his life was a symphony of success, headlines, and handshakes. But all that vanished the moment he realized that betrayal wasn't always loud. Sometimes, it was silent, and came from those closest to him. His son tried to have him declared mentally incompetent to take over the family fortune. His daughter drained his private accounts while calling every week just to check in. His best friend, a man who was also his personal doctor, faked years of medical treatments and invoices. Each betrayal carved deeper into William's soul. But the final blow wasn't financial. It was personal. Margaret, his wife, the only one who had never lied, passed away after a slow, cruel battle with cancer. With her, warmth left the house. William turned the mansion into a fortress. 26 rooms, 16 hidden cameras, and 3 silent alarms. No staff lasted more than a week. Most left before they were even fired. He barely spoke to anyone. He barely needed to. That is, until his body started to fail him. Tremors, exhaustion, memory lapses. For a man who once managed entire fleets across oceans, it was a hard truth to accept. He needed help. So, with reluctance and a heavy dose of paranoia, he called a staffing agency. His demands were strict: no criminal record, no social ache, media, no small talk, no questions, no exceptions. They sent him 3 profiles. The first 2 were dismissed with a glance. The third, it stopped him. Her name was Elena Brooks, 27. No frills, no fluff. The agency described her as purpose-driven. He scoffed at the phrase. People said that when they didn't want to admit, they needed the money. Still, something about her made him pause. He watched her arrive through his security cameras. She stepped off a bus with quiet confidence, no makeup, no jewelry, and no sign of trying to impress. When he opened the door, she didn't smile unnecessarily or fill the silence with chatter. Instead, she bowed her head slightly and asked, "For the library, sir. Should I dust the shelves only, or arrange the books by height?" It caught him off guard. The library was sacred, his late wife's favorite room. He hadn't allowed anyone to touch it in years, but Elena didn't pry. She respected the silence. Still, William needed to be sure. The next morning, he prepared a trap. He left the vault room door open, something he had never done before. Inside, the safe stood exposed, slightly ajar. Stacks of cash, gold coins, expensive jewelry, and property deeds lay in plain sight. And on the table next to it, a folded slip of paper with the safe's code written clearly. He positioned himself in the surveillance room, watching every camera angle with trained precision. Waiting. At exactly 8 a.m., Elena entered. She moved through the house as if she belonged there, tending to each corner with quiet dignity. Then she walked toward the east wing. She paused. She saw the safe. William leaned forward. Her eyes widened, her hand twitched, but she didn't step in. Instead, she reached for her phone, called his secretary. "There's a vault, open in the east wing," she said calmly. "Should I close it, or wait for instructions?" William blinked. Then, another call came in on her phone. This time, personal, from her mother. William watched her face shift. She turned away from the safe, whispered in shaky tones. He read her lips. Their family-owned grocery store, the only source of income, was going to shut down by the end of the week, unless they could pay $38,000 in back rent. Elena listened. Tears filled her eyes. She promised her mother she'd find a way. And then, she turned back to the safe. It was all there. The money. The answer. Just a few stacks, and no one would even notice. William had more than enough. She was just a housekeeper. But she didn't move. Instead, Elena reached for the slip of paper, the code, and then did something that made William stop breathing. She typed in a random code. The safe beeped. Locked. She folded the real code and tucked it into her pocket. Then she sat down, her shoulders shaking, and cried. Not out of regret, but because she had just won a war against herself. For 2 more hours she sat there, watching the safe, guarding it like it was her own. William watched every second. And in that moment, something inside him, something long buried beneath suspicion and pain, stirred. He descended the stairs slowly, letting his footsteps echo. Elena stood up, wiped her face, and tried to gather herself. "You're still here," he said softly. "I called your secretary," she replied. "I stayed to make sure nothing happened." He nodded. "I know. I watched." She didn't flinch. "I understand. It's your home." He handed her an envelope. "A thank you," he said. $50,000. You've earned it." But Elena looked down and pushed it back. "I didn't do it for money. I did what anyone raised right would do." William's throat tightened. Then she added, "Years ago, my cousin needed surgery. We couldn't afford it. An anonymous donor paid. When I applied here and saw your name on the hospital's donor list, I knew it was you. That's why I came. To serve with honor. William froze. He remembered the donation. He never thought he'd meet someone who lived because of it, let alone someone who would remind him who he used to be. He turned, walked to his desk, and pulled out a leather folder. This is the Winters Trust Foundation, he said. I created it to serve people with integrity. I've never found anyone I could trust to lead it. Until now. Elena stared at him. I'm just a housekeeper. No, he said. You're the woman who taught me that integrity still exists. And in that quiet, powerful moment, both of them understood. Honor is never about what you take. It's about what you choose not to. She had every reason to take the money, but she chose integrity instead. Elena Brooks stood at the edge of temptation. The vault was open. The code lay right there. Inside were stacks of cash, enough to save her family's grocery store, their only source of income from shutting down. On the phone, her mother's voice trembled, pleading for help. Her hands shook. Her heart raced. No one would notice if she took just a little. But Elena didn't take a step forward. Instead, she did the unthinkable. She locked the safe. She folded the code, tucked it into her pocket, and stood guard, not for reward, but because it was the right thing to do. What she didn't know was that the owner, William Lancaster, had been watching. It was all a test, one she didn't just pass, but transformed. In her quiet strength, she reignited something he'd lost long ago. Faith in humanity. Sometimes, doing the right thing won't give you instant rewards. It may cost you comfort, opportunity, or even your own peace. But integrity builds bridges where betrayal once stood. Elena reminded us, true character isn't shown when people are watching. It's shown when they're not. Did this story touch your heart? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever faced a moment like Elena's? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss another powerful story that restores your faith in what truly matters. Thank you for watching and for believing that goodness still lives in quiet places.